MD for Europe and Africa at Prax Group, Sarah Akbar, Chairperson and CEO of Oilserve Kuwait and Non-Executive Director at Petrofac, and Osama Rizvi, Energy and Economic Analyst at Primary Vision Network. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Sarah, let me start with you, and great to see you again. I'd like to sort of hit the ground running with OPEC with you and ask you, because they are meeting within a couple of weeks. Now, we've seen, as we saw from that survey question, that oil prices have been dropping in the last 3 weeks. And 52% of our audience think that's going to continue. We have seen a bit of recovery overnight. Not sure why that's the case. But generally speaking, the sentiment is we have plenty of supply, and that's why we've seen prices soften. What do you think OPEC needs to do at its next meeting?
I think, good morning, everyone. Good morning, there. I don't think they will do anything. I mean, they will keep the status quo. They have no reason to change anything. I think if you look at their forecast for next year, they expect demand to go up. They have revised their forecast to show some upside for next year. But at this point in time, I don't think, there is anything that will push them to make any kind of change to the status, the current status.
Okay, maybe not to change anything till December, but there's been a lot of talk that's definitely with prices now at these levels and not getting any premium from the tensions we're seeing in the region even, that it's likely, or at least OPEC ideally would want to Saudi would cut more, but then it gets put into a bit of a hole, doesn't it? Because then it's creating all that extra capacity. Do you think that they will cut more if things are as they are today in January from a price point of view?
But look at their forecast for next year. They expect demand to go up. So that will balance the softening that you see. And that's why I don't think this is the time for making that kind of decision. They will go into probably early next year to evaluate the situation, and then they will make any changes. But at this point in time, having in mind the economic recovery, the things that are seeing, the extra demand that is coming, probably that will take more of the softening.
Okay. Vladimir, let me go to you with that. I mean, this demand, OPEC has certainly more positive forecasts for demand than maybe other agencies in the immediate sense. And of course, we've seen some positive demand stats coming out this week. Inflation's coming under control in America and Europe. Employment is still very strong in America, etc. China, not such a rosy story. Maybe it's moderate. So where do you think, and from your indicators on container traffic and all that, is the sentiment that we are going to see demand strengthen next year, and when?
Yeah, I think that's the right question, is when. And we've probably said that about 2023, but it's going to be a tale of two halves. I don't see that very strongly coming up in the first half of 24. I mean, you can still see, Germany, UK, the Eurozone, basically flatlining still on growth, if not declining. Yes, we have major drop in CPI yesterday in UK. I think the biggest drop since many decades. But the core inflation is still above 5%. So I think, the central banks will still look at this and still fight in the sense of maybe not going up in rates, but certainly not going down very, very rapidly. So, what would be the reason for demand coming back? And I think, therefore, that we will see a relatively flat first half of 24. And if things pan out and inflation does get under control, I think the economies will grow in the second half. So I agree with Sarah. I mean, at the point, OPEC at the moment, probably the best thing is to do nothing, because you don't want to destroy more demand. And you don't want to flood the market because you didn't see really the inflection point yet.
Okay, yeah. So again, next year, like this year, everyone's saying the second half will be stronger, and that didn't quite happen this year. But anyway, thanks, Vladimir. Osama, Pakistan must be a bit relieved to see these prices softening a bit. How is that sort of translating on the ground there?
Actually, interestingly, I just recorded a video pertaining to that question for a local TV channel, and I think petrol prices, energy prices do make a lot of the it helps a lot in terms of softening the blow in terms of inflationary pressures. But there are a lot of other factors as well for countries like Pakistan specifically. One of the biggest factors, and one of the factors that unfortunately is out of the control of the country itself, because it requires international collaboration and whatnot, is climate change. So Pakistan is still reeling, the economy is still reeling from the effects of floods of biblical proportions last year, which cost the economy $30 billion. It also resulted in the loss of millions of livestock and millions of land tract, and essentially spiking up the food prices. And Pakistan is the second most vulnerable country to rising food prices globally. So, yeah, I mean, so far, the benefit of a fall in oil prices has not been that pronounced on the life of a common customer or consumer in Pakistan.
Okay, thanks, Osama. Sarah, just back to you and talking kind of a little bit about OPEC, but more about supply in general. Obviously you've had the cuts in the last year or two, helping to balance the market. A lot of people say that's been quite successful as a policy from OPEC plus. But of course, next year also we're going into discussions on quotas. You've got countries like the UAE and Kuwait who have serious plans to increase their production and want obviously to be able to export that. So the UAE has also already been given a bit of leeway within the OPEC plus agreement. But how does that sort of tally, do you think, with the policy next year going forward, as countries like Kuwait and the UAE have already expressed they want to be able to export at their maximum capacity? Do you see that creating an issue?
Okay, Diala, so let me bring two things up that are happening these days that will have some impact. The first one is this Biden-Xi meeting in the US. I think some kind of alignment between the two countries will help economic stability and can actually generate more demand. So this is one thing. And the other thing is, the US is really adamant to stop Iran from being able to export, and they will put even more pressure now. So between the two, you will see, that's why I feel for next year, and we really don't know if this winter will be harsh or not, okay? So far, it's not been, but let's see. So these three elements will actually determine where the price will go next year for OPEC. Now, as far as supply is concerned, I think none of these countries that you mentioned is affected by any of this discussion, because they are long-term planners, and this is the nature of our industry. You have to plan for the next 5 to 10 years. Whenever you make an investment decision, it is that kind of time frame. So these short-term changes will not affect the long-term plans, and everyone is going about executing their plans as they laid it out and just go about doing it. It's happening in Saudi, it's happening in the UAE, it's happening in Kuwait, it's happening in Iraq. So,
and I want to ask you about Iraq, but just to take you up, Sarah, on one or two of those things you said. First of all, the President Xi and Biden, it's over. I mean, it looks like the only outcome of that was, let's agree to kind of like keep things militarily quiet. Both of them have an interest in that happening. You've got US elections, you've got elections in Taiwan next year as well. So it looks like it was just sort of, okay, nothing more substantial than that. But just updating each other, please keep things, peaceful for now. But on the Iran front, you mentioned that. And why do you think it is that the US now is suddenly saying, we need to, come back and sort of be a bit stricter on these sanctions on Iranian oil when they've kind of been letting it flow? And can they do anything? This oil is going to China. So really, what can they do?
Okay, so I don't know if you are looking around, but if you look at the Middle East today, we have every single kind of military equipment ship in the region. I mean, I don't know. We have more military in the region now than when we had to liberate Kuwait. So, the region is really hot from that. And I think it's mainly because of what's happening in Gaza. We should never forget that. And I said this before, this war in Gaza is a turning point for the whole region as well. And the way we deal with Israel, the peace processes, everything is affected by that. And if you noticed, over the last 1 month, there has been so many attacks on military bases in specifically in Syria and Iraq. And every time there is an attack, the US comes out and said, we know this is Iran. We know this is Iran. It's not so. This is, and they keep warning Iran that, look, if you go further, we will go further. So that's why they feel that they need to do something about the oil export, because that's the way Iran is getting out of its revenue. So that's why they will be creative now in how to actually stop that flow. I mean, this is.
And I suppose with oil prices a bit softer, the US is less worried about these high prices that might cause, obviously, by taking Iranian oil off the market, maybe as a short-term thing. Vladimir, these reports about Europe becoming a bit more stringent about monitoring Russian ships in the Danish Strait, etc. Nothing official yet, and Russia has reacted to the talk of that, the reports, if you like. But do you think it'll make any difference? I mean, to prices, to the price cap, and also really to that Russian oil eventually getting somewhere, right? That's what we've seen. It eventually makes its way through some hole. So what's the difference here, do you think, going forward?
I think it's kind of similar, sending a message, and just by sending the message, certain actors will become more aware that it will make the whole thing more expensive, and thus kind of the net back to Russia will diminish. I don't think it's the intention to stop or anything similar. Things have kind of stabilized. There are rumors that some of those flows are finding ways back into EU, and I think that's where also this is kind of pointed to say to the actors, well, look, we're watching, and we know at the end where it ends up. So don't try to create a back door into our home markets, because that's what we don't want.
Okay. All right. And so you don't. But at the end of the day, okay, it may diminish revenues back to Russia, which essentially is the point, that these sanctions and price cuts. That's what is. I was listening to an FT article earlier today, an audio article, that now in terms of how things are impacting the Russian economy, the war, not only less revenues going back to the purse, but also that from a labor market point of view in Russia, Putin is diverting a lot of the workers and labor to the defense industry, and other industries are suffering. So, I suppose we're beginning to see a bit of an impact there, but Russian oil is still flowing. Osama, let me go to you about that. Two things, Pakistan's position on Russian oil and what's happening there with the discounts, how attractive are they? And also gas and LNG in terms of winters coming up. What's Pakistan's worries, if at all, about getting the LNG that it might need, not from Russia, but from elsewhere?
Yes. So first of all, if you allow me, I'd just like to add, to build on what the fellow panelist said regarding the Russian oil. I think if you look at the actual figures, there has been somewhat of a dent in Russian oil revenue, but that's only $25 million on month-on-month basis. And if you look at year-on-year basis, the oil revenue is still $5.75 billion more than January 2023 levels. Also, the oil exports, the fall in oil exports is only about 70,000 barrels per day. So, I mean, when you're looking at the intensity or the significance of this impact of sanctions, I believe so far it has not amounted to much. It hasn't done that damage to Russia, as the sanctions were supposed to do. Coming back to the question of Pakistan in terms of specifically LNG, because we are facing a gas crisis like any other country who's dependent on imports. So for that, I'm looking at the global energy markets, and there are a few trends that seem quite, encouraging for countries like us. First of all, the European gas inventories are at 99% capacity, and due to the onset of El Nino, and it is expected 2024 will be the hottest year on earth. Not to say that that's a good thing, but in terms of Europe getting a colder winter, that would help with the gas prices. If you look at the JKM contracts in the Asian markets, they have already started to follow, a downward trajectory recently. Similarly, if you look at the global, global growth dynamics, so the demand does not seem to be that much. Even today, there was an article that Clyde Russell in Reuters with, the Asian imports were only about 1.2 or 3 million barrels above as compared to last year. Also, what is helping us is the fact is that even the global traders or the overall sentiment, the hedge funds and money managers, they've also been helping with sort of stabilizing the energy prices recently. So I hope moving forward, because of these global trends, and as Pakistan tends to import most of its energy, I think it will be beneficial for Pakistan. Not for the global economy, probably, because these are all indicators that feed into the global or bigger recessionary story. But yeah, in terms of that, it will be helpful. So yeah, I'm looking at stable to downward side energy markets.
Okay. Sarah, I mean, on the demand front, you said OPEC is confident demand's going to come back next year. And obviously we've got predictions for China, a big obviously demand center. Vitol, we have an article on today's bulletin saying they see a balanced market in 24, so not too tight, not too loose. But within that context, where are your views on non-OPEC supply? Because we had quite a disagreement yesterday on our show with one speaker saying they expect non-OPEC supply to halve next year, growth in non-OPEC supply, and others following other forecasts that no, we're going to continue to see this more US production, more production from Brazil, etc. Where do you think OPEC stands on that, and would there be any concern, and would there be any impact on their ability to then manage the market?
Well, genuinely, OPEC is not always trying to just manage the market. They are just trying to create stability in the market. And these are two different things, okay? So they want to create stability. They want to be able to provide energy security to all, so that, like I said, when you look at a 5-10 years span in your business, then you want to be able to go through all of that. Now, from supply, I mean, you see the US now, although when you see the number of rigs, it's actually going down, not going up, but the production is going up and the export is going up. And I think by next year, even gas export will go up. Mm-hmm. So US is really become number one in export, both oil and will be in gas, not currently, but they will be in gas. So that actually it brings a new challenge to OPEC, really, because if you remember, 4 or 5 years ago, we were at that same point when the shale oil, was the main contender. And then there was this argument that, the OPEC is trying to put the shale oil out of business and stuff like that. But I mean, we are at that same point where supply from non-OPEC is increasing. And, you see some investments actually from private equity and so on coming into the oil and gas again. So we believe that this will, continue, but OPEC has taken all of that into consideration. As I said, they expect some demand growth next year, and if they keep their levels at where they are now, then the market will be really balanced, and this is what they are looking for in order to ensure security and stability.
Okay, Vladimir, what's the container traffic sort of outlook for let's say Q1, Q2, bearing in mind demand not just for oil products and oil, but also just products in general, trade flows between China and the US, etc. What are those sort of forecasts telling us about where we see demand going next year?
Well, it'd be in line with what I said before. I mean, container traffic is slowing. I think there was an announcement from Maersk, significantly reducing some of their workforce because they just don't see a demand for this. So it's quite clear we are in marine business, and we do see a declining kind of inquiry in that space, because there's just not there's less ships transporting less containers. And if that is an indicator, then certainly, it's not an uptrend.
Okay, all right. And I mean, in terms of how Russian tankers sort of fit within that, if you like, the gray fleet, if you like, and all that, is that? I mean, that's obviously talking just about oil and oil products, but is that impacting the other markets, so i.e., insurance in the tanker market, etc., in the illegal tanker market? How is that impacting things these days?
Well, yeah, we had the discussion, back in Fujairah actually around exactly that. I think the impact is that, or perception I think there's not more than that, because nobody really knows what the gray fleet is, and what is it. It's that it is probably let's say aging fleet. It's probably the ships that would otherwise be scrapped from the commercial fleet that are still on the sea. So obviously the risk is increasing of a event, and any such risk increasing and perception is of course filtrating into the insurance market. So they again, they are I would assume, or from my discussions, is they are expecting that the risk is higher of a event, and they're pricing it in. Because at the end of the day, it's the whole market that actually kind of takes the brunt if a major event happens, and I hope it won't. But it's just logical thinking.
It's a risk out there. Sarah, I just wanted to come back to you just to talk about Iraq. You mentioned it earlier. We did have just in terms of production forecast going forward. We had Exxon's contract finishing recently, but we do have then all the Kurdistan issues there being resolved, and Iraq is producing above its quota for OPEC at the moment, for example. Do you see that continuing into next year and being allowed as well by the group? And where is that trajectory going?
Well, I think last time Iraq produced over their quota, there was some correction mechanism that came in so that they can actually keep within their quota. But yes, I think the discussions with Turkey on the pipeline is still ongoing. There is no clear resolution yet on the restart of Kurdistan. And I really don't know if this will come to an end anytime soon. There is this discussion and continuing. There was discussion on the oil and gas law in the parliament, and that has been postponed as well. So things are really not changing much on that front. But from production capacity, Iraq actually is going about developing its oil and gas. And the Total project, the development of the Ratawi and all, it's now in action, and they started. So there are few projects in Iraq that will add some production, and probably Iraq will, in that case, in that scenario, I don't see how Kurdistan will come back into the game, because there is more potential in the south, and that is actually, from an economic point, that's cheaper production than Kurdistan, and it has an exit. So yeah, there will be added production in the south.
Okay. We have our survey question there that's just come up, which is to do with the OPEC Saudi cuts. Saudi is likely to announce extension of its 1 million barrel a day voluntary cut into 2024. When it'll announce it, we're not sure. What unlikely to be at the end of this month. But if it does, and many people are assuming it might, how long will that last? A month, 2 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, or all year? The way they're managing the market is unlikely to be more of a commitment than 3 months, I suppose, because as we've already said, they can come in and do anything, anytime, and balance the market. So let's see what we get back from that. Osama, just let's get a perspective. You gave us a bit of a picture of overall Pakistan's challenges on all fronts: food prices, oil prices, everything. What's the latest with the IMF in terms of what Pakistan may be seeking next year on that sort of macro front? And any impact, any sentiment in the country from the fact that we're beginning to see, interest rates in the US slow down, freeze, let's say for now, even cut next year, from a borrowing cost point of view, debt point of view, where are things feeling a bit more positive?
Yeah, so interestingly, Pakistan is second or the third most impacted country when it comes to rising US interest rates. And that is why I've always been very keen at following what's happening in the US. So far, there is a halt, but I think there might be a chance for 1 or 2 more hikes moving forward because the core inflation still remains high. However, in terms of Pakistan and the outlook, IMF and everything, so far, everything seems to be on track. We have received these, we are still in the standby agreement. There has been some positive economic developments recently. One of the things is the, coming up of the Special Facilitation Investment Council, SFIC, where the army and the government and everyone seems to be on the same page. It looks very good on the paper, and hopefully it'll also, do something in the practical realm as well. In terms of our financing needs, Pakistan still needs $25 billion every year for the next 3 years. So I believe that our love affair with IMF will go on for another 3 to 4 years, lest we take some structural reforms and steps in that direction. But globally, I believe, once again, it might sound a little selfish, but I think, because I'm a pro risk, I'm a bear for 2024 as well. I think because of money supply, for instance, M2 for the first time in history has turned negative. US delinquencies are rising. Loans are at near historic lows. Affordability is lowest since, I don't know, 1960s or 70s. Housing is down. So I think a recession is in the making, and such conditions might help Pakistan in its macroeconomic stability moving forward, because we tend to be an import-led economy.
Okay, thanks, Osama. Vladimir, let's talk a bit about Europe and gas. I mean, we did mention LNG with regards to Pakistan, but the gas, I mean, I know that's not your specialty, but just in terms of flows and sentiment in Europe, in terms of economy, and how the bloc is doing, if you like, and any worries about cost of living crises, etc., as we go into winter, or do we feel that as industrial demand is down in places like Germany, everywhere else, we'll have no problem this year with supplies, gas, and therefore prices?
I think Europe has obviously done quite a lot in terms of energy supply, infrastructure, ability to kind of cross-border flows of gas in the last 2 years. We've already heard the storages are almost pump full, and we're kind of mid of November, where you would already expect them to start depleting. The winter is actually relatively mild as well. So I think from those conditions, I don't see any major issue unless you will have a prolonged cold spells, etc., because it's kind of coming from the demand and the supply part. It's much better supply in terms of ability to supply and the infrastructure. The demand has rebalanced. The external factors are actually there to have a relatively stable prices, and you can see that on the gas prices. I mean, the winter gas prices were a month ago much higher than they are now, so the market expects actually a very balanced winter.
Yeah, and even into Q1, the forward prices are not looking too bad. Sarah, we'll go back to you for the last word. I wanted to address, you mentioned obviously the conflict in the Middle East. You did last time you were on the show tell us that this is a big turning inflection point. Clearly it is, but where do we go next is the question specifically. So I'm sensing that you're saying that's going to slow down, for example, these economic plans for the region in terms of a more peaceful zone, but also this risk premium more immediately that we're seeing has been softened in the last month rather than increased, and that would indicate that people aren't expecting the conflict to get worse, or else they've priced in how bad that into price already. What's your sentiment there on that? And could we see prices spike for any reason?
Well, like I said, there is a lot of military in the region, and the smallest thing can flare. So yes, the risk is high, but so far it's been under control. And if you talk to people on the ground everywhere in the region, they are really upset with what's happening in Gaza, and they see these atrocities day and night. I mean, all the TVs, all the WhatsApps, it's all about Gaza and about what's happening there. So that's why I'm saying, even if governments wanted to do something, they are really not able, because the people really, the sentiments are really very high on what's happening in Gaza. And it's not they are just upset with Israel, they are upset with the whole West, because the way the West has been supporting Israel, every single move they make as governments, not people, is making more animosity towards the West. So these feelings, indirectly will affect what governments will do. So far, the governments have really gone about doing their plans as if nothing is happening. And they are talking, trying their best to try to, keep situations under the control. But like I said, small things can flare up and I can change the situation. And, God forbid, if a war, if they start this Iran war, then for sure, it's not about premium. You will see the highest spike you can see on oil price.
Yeah, I mean, certainly all that military engagement, as you said, in the water, does make us wonder why so much of that is needed.
But nobody wants it. Let's put it this way. Nobody wants it. I mean, every single country in the region does not want that. Yeah.
Clearly, except for maybe one country, which is in the region. But anyway, we won't go too much further on that. There's our survey results. Saudi Arabia is likely to announce an extension 2 to 3 months. That's playing safe if they were to announce something. And of course, they can intervene, every month and reverse those cuts if needed, certainly. So there's the results. And Sarah, you put it very well that the Western governments have been very disappointingly not calling for a ceasefire, but certainly the people on the street in the West are showing tremendous support, which is always a positive sign. So thank you everybody for joining us, Vladimir, Sarah, and Osama this morning, and have a great day. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.